Saturday morning breaking news. Georgia announces a pretty big coaching change here, but I think this is unequivocally a win for the Georgia program. Travaris Robinson is going to be Georgia's new co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. That title was previously held by Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp will be off-field analyst role. And Jeff, you were jumping on this right away. I think you have the best sense of what this means for Georgia going forward. We also have Brandon Adams here. We'll throw to him shortly. Jeff, point blank, what does this hire, pulling Travaris Robinson away from Alabama, chiefly the day after Kalen DeBoer gets hired, what does this mean?
I think the good word here, guys, Brandon, Connor, this is one of those flexes. You know how I like that scene in like Karate Kid when Mr. Miyagi does like this? This is kind of what Kirby Smart's doing here. I hope everybody appreciates the 80s reference. But T-Rob, whenever you're out and about looking at DBs, he's there. I kind of thought to myself when I saw this breaking this morning that for defensive back recruiting, I'm probably going to have to be an astronomer now following all the stars, because you look at what they do. I mean, guys, T-Rob has been in South Carolina. He's been at Auburn. He's been in Miami. He's been in Florida. He's been in Alabama. I think it's a great way. One point that was made, kind of my text messages this morning, Donta Williams is going to get baptized into SEC football and SEC football recruiting and relationships this year with Georgia. And what better kind of mentor to do it with than like T-Rob, and now Will Muschamp still on staff, and also Kirby Smart as well. I can't imagine Georgia's defensive back recruiting looking any better, looking any more well-positioned to strike for prime targets. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Maybe this will make Brandon lean in any closer. You want to position yourself for the best chance to land Caleb Downs should he jump in the transfer portal. I know there's a lot of smoke there right now with Ohio State, but this is how Georgia does it.
And BA, I'll throw to you here. Obviously, Robinson is hired, Kalen DeBoer is hired yesterday. Big hope, a Buford safety commits to Georgia last night. What does this sort of hire from Kirby Smart mean going forward for the program?
Well, first of all, I would like to declare news bankruptcy. I can no longer follow the news. The news is getting so crazy now that, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like as far as I knew, Will Muschamp was still Georgia's co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. The news is so crazy now that you get, text message tip-offs or headlines or whatever else. And it's just honestly confusing because I didn't even know this was a need, which probably speaks to Kirby Smart's ability as a coach, that he is sort of solving problems for Georgia that we didn't even know existed. I mean, I totally agree with what Jeff said, that obviously T-Rob is one of the most respected assistant coaches in the SEC. So to have that guy on the Georgia staff is awesome. And knowing that he has a previous relationship with Caleb Downs is probably not a bad thing either, if in the event that ever becomes, a relevant topic overall. But I do think it speaks to, for Kalen DeBoer, and listen, I think it was a good hire for Alabama. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think what it speaks to here is that the SEC teams that you're competing with have a very significant head start against you. And that includes Georgia, who's, hosting a bunch of guys this weekend, coaches on, out and about yesterday, and now getting a guy like T-Rob who knows the landscape here so well and recruits know him so well. This sort of gives you an idea that as Kalen DeBoer tries to get up and running in Alabama, Georgia's already very much at full speed.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify here, again, Will Muschamp to move to an off-field role. We have an official statement here from Kirby Smart. We are pleased to announce Travaris Robinson as our new co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. Travaris has 17 years of college coaching experience, including over a decade in the SEC, mentoring some of the top defenses statistically in the NCAA. We are excited about the addition of Coach Robinson and his family to the University of Georgia, while having the opportunity to retain Coach Muschamp and his family on our staff. And I think with Muschamp here moving forward, it is maybe more skeptical or speculation than anything, but he was out on the road recruiting for Georgia yesterday. I know he's going to move into an off-field analyst role, something he originally came to Georgia to do. But in a situation now, Muschamp, he's made a lot of money. He's won national titles as co-defensive coordinators. He's been an SEC head coach. He's done just about everything I think he wants to do as a coach. And so he's someone who can probably move back and forth between working as an analyst role when it is needed for Georgia and sometimes. And I think in this situation where we're moving into a new 12-team college football playoff, I think that's significant. But also, let's say Robinson gets hired to go be a head coach somewhere, or Donta Williams gets hired to go be a defensive coordinator somewhere. I think you can have someone like Muschamp move back into the staff like he initially did in the 2021 season and fill a variety of roles for Georgia. And so I think while, yes, he is moving to an off-field analyst role, I think he is someone who is still very, very important to this Georgia program moving forward.
And I'll say this, and then I'll hop off and let y'all finish because I think y'all are both in a better position to talk about this than I probably am. I totally agree that Muschamp in the analyst role, which is what he came to Georgia to do anyway. Well, you're talking about valuable football expertise just to have around your building. Muschamp right now, by appearances, is having the time of his life. We saw him smiling the way only a dad can when Jackson got a chance to play in the Orange Bowl. I thought that was really a pretty touching moment. And I know Jeff probably knows more about this than I do, but I'm led to believe that, Muschamp was traveling a good bit, of course, the last couple of years watching his son play, there at Baylor and Chattanooga as he was kind of finishing his high school career. I believe he's going to Vanderbilt. And so it seems like Muschamp is really into being a dad right now. And so if being an analyst gives him a chance to do more of that while Georgia gets to borrow his unquestioned football expertise, and then you also add a guy like T-Rob to the staff, I don't see how you can view this as anything more than a Grand Slam home run. I would never want Muschamp off the staff unless that's his wish. But if that is his wish, you can keep him around and then also bring in a guy like T-Rob. If you're a Georgia fan, boy, you got a lot of reasons to smile today, I believe. And with that, I'll leave that with y'all.
Yep, thanks for hopping on, BA. BA is actually going to watch the Hoop Dogs. They tip off at noon against Tennessee. Make sure to check them out. I believe that game is on ESPN. BA, don't come back if they don't win.
I'm right. I'll only come back with a victory. That sounds good, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, BA. And so we'll throw it now to you, Jeff. Again, you know recruiting better than anyone. You've seen T-Rob. You know T-Rob. Georgia already recruits defensive backs at an elite level. They signed 4 top 100 defensive back prospects in the 2024 recruiting class. But what does the hiring of Robinson mean for Georgia on that front?
I think very simply, state it here. It means Georgia is the place to be if you want to get elite defensive back coaching. I mean, in the South, and to recruit these guys as well. A little bit on Muschamp. I think, guys, it's probably family related. He just got to see Jackson play. Jackson is graduating. His younger son is actually going to be at Vandy this fall. He's a scholarship quarterback at Vandy. Might be a little bit if he just wants to see his boys play football. I think the thing about Will is so great. And listen, Kirby Smart has carte blanche all over the program. But I think what Will can do is he can be a noted voice in the room, like, hey, what about this? I think that's where Will's opinion, his expertise. Guys, you remember the backstory we've been seeing recently about Kirby Smart shared that story about his first interview with Nick Saban. I believe he was at a private air hangar somewhere in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Will Muschamp sat in on that interview, Kirby's first interview with Nick Saban. That's how well those two guys go back. But now you bring T-Rob, and folks, I don't think anybody should start calling him Travaris or Coach Robinson. It is T-Rob. So get that right when you're eating your grits in the morning. T-Rob with safeties. There's so many times when last few years Georgia's went head-to-head. Jake Pope, for instance, Peyton Woodyard, for instance. T-Rob was the one doing the recruiting. T-Rob has been the guy in Alabama that was kind of that reverse polarity trying to keep those guys away from Georgia. Now he joins Georgia. I think this is just a case. Rich get richer, strong get stronger. Like I said earlier, this is a huge flex for Georgia to have T-Rob on the staff.
Especially because, again, Alabama hires Kalen DeBoer on Friday. I think one of the things and one of the major talking points, and I do agree with BA, I think this is a very good hire for Alabama. But it can be both a very good hire and still a step back for Alabama with what they have been doing, simply because Nick Saban was that great of a head coach. And one of the holes on DeBoer's resume is he has never worked in the South, and he has never been an elite high school recruiter. He did a great job of building Washington back up through the transfer portal. But I think going forward, the kind of guys like T-Rob were the kind of guys that Alabama needs to keep on staff, guys that know the South intimately and can help him make that transition. So not only does this help Georgia and fortify them moving forward and get another young, promising coach in there, but I think this also does impact Alabama a little bit. Now, they're going to be able to go out and spend top dollar to find elite assistants, but in knowing DeBoer's staff a little bit, they followed him from Fresno State to Washington, and he has a lot of deep ties to that staff. So as DeBoer fills out his staff, I'm going to be very interested in see how much of it is his guys and how much of it is guys that have that knowledge of the South and know the SEC. Because, and I'm not comparing him in any way to the name I'm about to throw out there, But Brian Harsin came from the Pacific Northwest and went to work at Auburn. And he was sort of, I think, handed Mike Bobo and handed Derek Mason to help him on that staff. And it just didn't go very well. From behind the scenes people I've talked to, it was not a very good season there that first year for Brian Harsin. And then you see a year later, he is out there. It is a difficult job that he is stepping into. And I think having Robinson or T-Rob on his staff would have made it easier. Now that he's got to go against him, is going to make it even more difficult moving forward.
Yeah, Connor, that's a very strong point. I think one of the things you do is you weaken Alabama, and how you do that is the best transition possible for DeBoer to get in the South. I mean, listen, Connor, I was kind of, I know you're a very cynical, very great sense of humor. I think this makes T-Rob, I think he's got 6 or 7.
There you go.
I think he's got like 6 or 7 spots in the SEC bingo card now here checked off with Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina. Can't throw Miami in there. Maybe Miami will be in the SEC in a couple of years. Who knows what's going to happen? But this is a way that DeBoer, how do you make him hit the ground running? Well, you bank on all those contacts with a guy like T-Rob. Folks, everybody that's a good DB that thinks they're an SEC DB in 2025, 2026, and 2027, they already know T-Rob's name. They're already thinking about, hey, Georgia might be the new rising power. Alabama might be dropping. Well, pulling T-Rob out of Tuscaloosa, dropping him in Athens just makes things even easier for the Dogs.
And you touched there on T-Rob, his obviously long list of experience. He was Will Muschamp's defensive coordinator for their entire time in South Carolina together. And so I think the fact that you're keeping Muschamp on staff there, anytime you work with Kirby Smart, and you bring in a new coach, it hasn't always worked out, especially you can look at that defensive backs coach and the sort of way that they've cycled through that position over the years. But I think having Muschamp still work as an off-field analyst, having someone that T-Rob knows on the staff, I think is going to make that transition even easier. And obviously, I think T-Rob knows and understands coming in that that Kirby's still obviously going to be very involved with the safeties. That is something we're going to continue to see happen there moving forward. But in having T-Rob there and having, SEC ties, and look, Georgia has spoken very highly of him for a long time. I believe before Fran Brown had gotten hired, this was a guy that was being considered for that defensive backs job. That was back in, I believe, the 2022 offseason. This is a guy that is very, very well coveted, not just by Georgia, and it's great that they have him now, but by the entire SEC. And the fact that you're able to add him to the staff with Dante Williams as well. Yes, that's a lot of changeover for a defensive backfield that was already going to see a lot next year. They're going to have to replace Kamar Lassiter, Tyke Smith, Javon Bullard. But with the brain trust that they have there, again, with Kirby Smart, I think you're always going to have strong defensive back play. But when you bring in T-Rob, who this isn't just a move for right now, this might be a move that, pays off for a while for Georgia, because I will point out, Glenn Schumann, and you and I have spoken at length about this before. Glenn Schumann at some point is going to be a head coach somewhere. Where that is, we don't know. But I would also point out, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be looking for a defensive coordinator again. They made a strong push to get Schumann last year, and who knows, maybe they do that again. It is telling to me that they give Robinson the co-DC title instead of just safeties coach, because I think that shows that they sort of envision moving forward, this can be a guy that plays a bigger role for us. And maybe, when Schumann does move on, he becomes that full-time defensive coordinator.
Yeah, good point. I think one of the first people to retweet the Travaris Robinson hire, the T-Rob hire, let me get in character here. It was Will Muschamp. And then you make a great point that's been his guy for a lot of years. I think all the things you think about there with, and we say this a lot, Connor, and I hope people do not interpret this the wrong way. Like when we talked the other day about Glenn Schumann as a candidate and would Bama go after him, and then I just said he's not ready. He's got a young family. I think this is a lot like people talking about Kirby Smart leaving Alabama in 2013 or 2014. He doesn't get the Georgia job until 2016. I think the fairest point I can always make is Glenn Schumann, if he takes a head coaching job in the next 4 years, 5 years, he's ahead of the Kirby Smart track. And that's kind of the best compliment you can give somebody, that they can be a head coach in the SEC by the time they're 40 years old. And I think Schumann will eventually get a job. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when, because sooner or later he's got that young family, but sooner or later he's going to be like, okay, I can get one job, I can get 5 years, and I can set my family up for the rest of my life. And that's when you have to take that money, because the money is so insane in the SEC. But right now, I mean, Connor, I can't imagine Georgia's defensive back coaching tree. It looks like a coaching acres right now when you've got Muschamp's going to be in the room for some points. You've got Kirby Smart in the room. You've got Travaris Robinson in the room. You've got Dante Williams in the room. I mean, that is a lot of dudes that know how to coach, know how to recruit, know what they're looking for the Georgia guy to play this defense. And it sounds crazy to say it, but Georgia just got even better today.
Mm-hmm. And while I have you here, we'll talk about the news that happened last night. Georgia lands a safety from Buford. They land two in the span of a little over a month. Jake Pope flips from Alabama, where he'd spent the last 2 seasons, to Georgia. Jeff, you've known Pope since he was a recruit. What is Georgia getting in Jake Pope, and what does he bring to this safety room?
Yeah, he's a guy that knows the system. He's going to be known to have what it's like to be being yelled out by T-Rob. I think one of the things, I think most people on social media didn't get this point. They were already like, oh, Georgia just nabbed their first guy post-Saban from Alabama. That sounds good to say to your buddies around the water cooler or in the driveway this week, but Pope was already in the portal before the big Saban news. He was looking to move on. He was basically a special teams player in his second year at Alabama. Really physical, really smart player. He's a guy that was a multiple sport athlete in high school. And it's funny how Georgia probably wasn't the second choice coming out of high school. I think that was North Carolina. And now Georgia was the first choice coming out of Alabama, coming out of the portal. And I think really, maybe I'll be the first person to own this, Connor. I'm going to say, man, that Buford streak, man, it's just rolling. That Buford streak, dogs. You look at the DBs they've added so far, they've got 2 consecutive DB adds to the roster, and both of them are from Buford High School or went to school at Buford High School. So I believe Coach Appling at Buford when he says, listen, man, there's nobody, there's no staff in the country that we're closer to, that I'm closer to. Coach Appling, we even had to write that story to put it to bed for once and for all. He's like, he even told me on the record, which is at some kind of professional hurdle to him. He says, I'm a dog. I grew up in Lithonia, been a dog all my life. I'm a Georgia fan. And for folks that think that, he's steering guys away from Georgia, well, there's more proof in the pudding.
Yeah, I'm sure Kaylee Manziel is somewhere wearing her Buford green, just fist pumping right now with this news. I think with what Georgia has done, and specifically with Pope and maybe his fit on the 2024 roster, I know he didn't start at Alabama, was behind Caleb Downs. There were a lot of safeties last year. Malachi Starks might be one of 4 safeties in the country that would have started over Caleb Downs last year. And, we'll ultimately see if Downs goes into the portal. I know Ohio State, who's brought back a lot of talent for this 2023 team. We'll see what ends up happening with Downs. I think he's probably the most interesting player to watch on that Alabama roster right now. I think with Pope and where he maybe fits in next year, you're going to have to replace one of your safeties, and you also have that star position available as well. You know what Dane Jackson is. I think you know what David Daniel is for you. Ja'Cory Thomas is someone who I'm very interested in seeing how he develops this offseason. And so Pope can be a guy that, at the very least, he can come in and play special teams for you, which is always big for Georgia. But it wouldn't surprise me if you see Pope find a way onto the field, because I know as much as we're going to talk about KJ Bolden and as big a recruiting win as that was for Georgia, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be like Malachi Starks and come in and play right away. He's someone who is a very different prospect than Starks was coming out of that high school rank. And quite frankly, he's a guy that he just needs to – his body, I don't believe, is fully college ready right now. And he's someone who is going to need to make some serious gains in the Georgia strength and conditioning program, whereas you have someone in Pope who's been in Alabama strength and conditioning program for 2 years. As hard as this might be to believe right now, Jake Pope might be closer to contributing at safety next year for Georgia than KJ Bolden. Bolden's obviously got a lot of time to get up to that point in time, but that is certainly something that I think is now an offseason storyline, as Georgia has not just 1, but 2 Buford players on their roster.
I think the way to look at that, I'm glad you mentioned Ja'Cory Thomas. I think the staff feels good about what they've shown, what they've seen, and what he's shown them. So that's an option there. The big thing, I think, is trying to find a guy ideally to replace the Tyke Smith. I don't know. I think it's going to cover a range of things. I don't even know if a guy like Troy Bowles might be a guy that drifts over there. As far as your player comparisons, I think Pope is more like the bull safety for Georgia. And I think I'm going to get in the habit, Connor, of just calling that strong safety the bull safety for a while.
I like that.
You see some of, they call this guy star, they call this guy nickel, but I see a lot of that bull type tendency in Pope. I believe our folks that are watching and listening right now that already love that social media hit, that viral hit where Pope, I think, leveled Jermaine Burton during the spring game. this past year. A lot of Pope's plays are splash plays, a strong safety, a bull safety at Georgia type player. Hopefully I don't need to drop a disclaimer about that's Javon Bullard, a player that will really, really butt heads with somebody and make some people question concussion protocols and things like that. I think KJ, and I got to see him a little bit out in Texas. I think KJ is going to be Malachi. I think that's the role. He's a free safety. He's not a strong safety. And I think I was encouraged that KJ was already like 190. I think he's probably about 5 to 10 pounds away from that SEC body he needs to have. But I think Pope is an example. And Connor, we're going to say this a lot because I think it's important to say this a lot. Georgia might play 16 games next year.
Yep.
And folks, and you're going to worry about playoff seeding because it's going to look a lot more like the NFL. Guys are going to go down. So Kirby Smart's going to treat this position on the roster like every position. Do I have 4 guys that I can play winning football with right now? And if you sit there and go, you go Jake Pope, you go Ja'Cory Thomas, you go David Daniel, you go, who's that 4th guy there? Who are you going to find? Is it Troy Bowles maybe? Are you trying to find another guy? Kind of look how creative Georgia's been with Jalen Walker recently over the years and trying to get their most talented 11 on the field. I think Malachi is going to be an All-American. I think he's going to be a top 5 pick, top 10 pick. Hard for safeties to get in the top 5 because the NFL just doesn't value that as other spots. You can see a lot of guys like Kyle Hamilton. He didn't run well. He's a Pro Bowler, but he didn't run well. He didn't go really high. But I really
players in the entire NFL.
Yeah, now he's one of the very best. That's kind of funny. Kyle Hamilton came out, and I think he ran a 4.7 at the combine or 4.6, and he fell really far. And now, Kyle Hamilton's first team All-Pro, and where the Ravens are at now. But I really like, Pope fits that smart, tough, fast, physical football player. Forgive me, guys. I forgot to throw Dan Jackson in my catalog and Dewey Decimal System of all the safety options there for Georgia. My brain's wired to think scholarship players first. Yep. That's the way I do. But I mean, again, this is one of those things. I think Brandon kind of hit on it first of all, I got to say this about Brandon. He says, I could pop on and show my face. He's literally traversing in the family truckster on the way to Athens. I think that's a new one for his bingo card. You got his kids in the background listening in, but I think what Georgia does, this is news that just kind of drops out of nowhere because you see Muschamp in Northwest Georgia recruiting all day yesterday. And then the following day, this big announcement, this big news. I feel like this has been planned. I feel like this is something where Travaris maybe is like, do I stay with DeBoer? Do I wait and see what DeBoer is going to do? Or do I go ahead and hop over with Georgia and Will and Kirby and see what that has to offer? Because the greatest point I think you and I could either make in this broadcast is Travaris Robinson would have helped with recruiting. He would have helped with SEC ball. He would have helped with all those relationships for the Alabama staff. Now, of course, people can say that Nick Saban is the ultimate chess piece on the board where he can open all doors. He can help with all things, but he's kind of not doing that day to day anymore. And I think that's where Georgia is going to have a big edge in this one.
And, it's important to note here, Nick Saban is expected to still have an office there in the Alabama football facilities. He's expected to still be around. His presence will loom there. But I don't know, from an Alabama side, I don't know how you look at this as anything but a loss. T-Rob was a guy that was very clearly valued by that Alabama coaching staff. And quite frankly, you look at the job he did as their cornerbacks coach in developing Kool-Aid McKinstry and developing Terrion Arnold into first-round cornerbacks. And I know there are a lot of people out there, including some people on Georgia's staff, who didn't necessarily see Terrion Arnold as a cornerback. He's going to be a first-round cornerback in this upcoming NFL draft. And I think that's a big credit to T-Rob and his ability as a teacher and a coach there, along with the fact that he's an elite recruiter. And I just find it hard to believe, and Alabama fans are going to spin this however they want. They can tout that they have hired a coach who was 104-12, but 67 of those wins came at the NAIA level. I just find it hard to believe that this is anything but a loss for Alabama, and conversely, a big win for Georgia, because you bring in a guy with a ton of SEC experience. You bring in a guy who's one of the best recruiters. It sounds like a lot of Georgia's coaches, but when you're able to bring in a guy like T-Rob, that real SEC fans, the ones that watch South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri, Kentucky type games, not just the 3:30 CBS game, RIP. When you watch those types of games and that type of name, I think that this is an even bigger win for Georgia. And as we get ready to wrap up here, Will Muschamp in the role and what he meant to this Georgia program. I know he obviously recruited a lot of guys that are on this team right now and played a key role in their development. But I think for him to come back to Georgia and help that team in 2021, step in when Scott Cochran had to move to an off-field role, he's done everything that Georgia has asked him to do. I thought the Orange Bowl moment, I thought that was one of the coolest things I've seen in my time here at Georgia. I think that's an unbelievable thing that he got to experience. And that's someone who doesn't have kids. As someone who does, I can only imagine how much that must have, just filled you with joy. And so getting that moment, getting to work on 2 national championship teams, this is Will Muschamp just, again, doing what I think he wants to do, but also what Georgia wants him to do as well. And so, while Will Muschamp is obviously a key piece to this Georgia team, and you can't tell the story of this program without him the last couple of years, going from Will Muschamp to T-Rob, that's not that big of a drop-off as some people might think it might be.
It's not. And guys, also forgot another name on the safety catalog. Obviously, Jonel Aguero. See, Georgia's got so many now. Come on, guys.
And yeah, so hold on. We lost Jeff there. There we go. Jeff is back.
I mean, so they've got so many guys there. Here's one thing. I hope people get this right. And I love, Connor, how you kind of called out but didn't call out the NAIA accounting. You're like, oh, we're in the SEC and we're counting NAIA wins here now. Is that what we're doing now? Let's count NAIA championships. I want to see the championship tote board for the board there as well. But T-Rob is a guy. This is another way to say it. Georgia has taken L's in recruiting because of Travaris Robinson, T-Rob, in some head-to-head battles. Now he's joining the Dogs. Now he's in Athens. It sounds like he's gleefully in Athens. I love how quickly people can Photoshop people into new gear these days. I mean, it's kind of funny, man. Like, it's kind of like, the guy that used to be able to hold the slips of paper, for the lottery, or hold the slips of paper, that creative artist team, that graphics artist team. Now, can you imagine them getting woke up this morning? It's like, all right, we got this guy coming. You need to get this ready for T-Rob. And that's how quickly it happens. It's a good day for Georgia. I think this is such big news, Connor, that I don't think the basketball result can cloud anything that happens the rest of the day. This is really a big deal. You see very little, very, 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 very little do you see a staff change like the one of this magnitude at the University of Georgia, one of the top 5 teams, top 5 programs in the country by anybody's book and by everyone's accord. I think they're the undisputed number 1 going into next year. And Dogs get better today.
Again, Will Muschamp is an incredibly valuable piece to this Georgia team over the last couple of years, and he's still going to be in an off-field analyst role. But when you're able to add someone like T-Rob to this staff, who I think still is on the come up in terms of his coaching career, and it doesn't help that it hurts Alabama at the same time. Now they're going to be able to go out there and find quality coaches, but when you're able to land a guy like T-Rob and pull them away, I think that's huge for this Georgia program moving forward. This is a win not just for this 2024 season coming up, but I think moving forward as well in terms of what T-Rob is going to bring to this team. So that's Jeff Santel. We had Brandon Adams on here briefly. He had to pop in and react to the latest breaking news.
10 and 2, Brandon.
10 and 2, driving the whole way, making sure his family gets there safely. My name is Connor Riley. Big news. Georgia hires Travaris Robinson to be the co-DC and safeties coach. We'll refer to him as T-Rob from here on out. Will Muschamp is going to be moving to an off-field analyst role. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm sure there'll be more news at some point this weekend. Stay warm out there, especially if you're in Kansas City or Buffalo for the playoff games this weekend. And if you have any trouble with Peacock, good luck.